All right, going over the Los Angeles Chargers in fantasy football team preview. You're with your host, Justin Henry, and we'll be going over all 32 teams and every fantasy relevant player. If you haven't checked out the playlist, it's full of every single team. Make sure you do yourself a favor and check it out, going over all the players, you name it. Now, I want to talk about the Los Angeles Chargers, and this team is now going through a major rebuild. Last year under Brandon Staley, we thought this team had fantasy. They went and got Kellen Moore, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams to start the year before he got hurt. Austin Eckler was coming off a strong season. We expected a lot out of this Los Angeles Chargers team fantasy-wise, and it failed to deliver. Now, the team went and made some changes this offseason, getting rid of a lot of the pieces that we're accustomed to seeing on this Charger team and bringing in Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh is now coaching this Los Angeles Charger team. Keenan Allen is gone. Mike Williams is gone. Gerald Everett is gone. Austin Eckler is gone. So 4 of the core pieces of this offense that we've been accustomed to seeing over the years are now gone. And this team's identity, which was passing the ball, the aerial attack, staying in games late because of Justin Herbert's arm, that's kind of gone now. All right. So with Jim Harbaugh, we've seen his style at Michigan. We know what he was in the NFL with the 49ers. We know he likes to grind it out a little bit more. And I think this Chargers team is going to be taking on a little bit more of that identity, especially because they brought in Greg Roman. And Greg Roman, we saw what he was with the Niners, with the Baltimore Ravens, loves to ground and pound, will find creative ways to get the quarterback in space. But this is a chain moving offense and not a this isn't a high flying, deep passing type offense. We're going to see a little bit different Charger offense this year. Especially, you got to consider that when drafting quarterback Justin Herbert. All right. So when it comes to Justin Herbert, now we all had top 5. Once he was drafted, once we saw that first year with Justin Herbert under center, it was like, the sky is the limit for this kid. He has one of the best arms in the NFL, throws a very nice ball. In only 13 games last year, he had 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. That's what kind of special player Justin Herbert is. We all had top 3-5 viewpoint on him when it comes to fantasy, and there's a lot of people who put him in their top 5 when it comes to NFL quarterbacks. So for this year, now the receiving core is going to look different. The run game will look a lot different. The coordinator and coaching changes will make Justin Herbert look a lot different this year. Do we need to penalize him a tremendous amount this year because of that? I don't think so, right? What you're going to see is he was drafted last year. In years past as a top 5 to 7 quarterback. I think he comfortably sits in the top end of the QB2s, and we may even get some value on him because people are going to push him down even further. He still has a great arm. We'll still have a lot of the mobility that we want to see out of the quarterback position. It's just, can he stay healthy? That's a big thing because Justin Herbert's been banged up over the last few years. And can he get these new wide receivers up to speed? Okay, so we obviously know the focal point is going to be on the ground and through the run game. That's how the offense will move. But let's not forget what kind of quarterback Justin Herbert is. And we are calling this kid special. I still think we can get some decent production out of him. Will it be, pushing the 5,000 yard marker? I don't think so. Will it be pushing the 40 touchdown marker? I don't think so as well. But I still think we'll see some strong games out of Justin Herbert. And his team will probably be playing from behind in a lot of cases. So we may even see more passing out of him in those elements. Okay. So don't penalize Justin Herbert too much in your drafts. It's going to be a popular fade name. People are going to say, I don't see how he does top 15 in Greg Roman's offense with Jim Harbaugh there. But let's not forget, Colin Kaepernick was very fantasy relevant under Jim Harbaugh. Lamar Jackson was very fantasy relevant under Greg Roman. Okay. So it's not like they're just going to say, hey, we don't want you to do anything with your legs or with your arm and just run the football. We still will see some value out of Justin Herbert or just be a little bit more controlled would be the way I categorize that. So I think Justin Herbert actually might be a little bit of a value where he's going in drafts, especially in super flex leagues if you can get him as your QB2. And then when it comes to the ground game, obviously this was Austin Eckler's backfield for the longest time. He is now gone in Washington with the Commanders. So in comes in some reliable backs that Greg Roman had in Baltimore, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. We'll start with Gus Edwards, who was kind of a godsend last year for the Ravens. when their running backs went down. J.K. Dobbins went down early in the year. We saw Keaton Mitchell go down later in the year. So Gus Edwards was phenomenal in his role, had 810 yards, 13 touchdowns for the Baltimore Ravens, and finished as the RB25. So, there could have been, if he would have been starting the entire season and getting a starter's workload, we could have saw a lot more out of Gus Edwards, but he played well in his role, played well as a backup, played well splitting carries. We won't get a whole lot of, of pass catching out of Gus Edwards. That's just not his role. But what we will get is 20 to 25 carries a game out of Gus Edwards. And the team has said they want to get him a nice workload. So I think Gus Edwards will be sneaky value this year when it comes to ADP, depending on where it shakes out. If he's back-end RB2, high-end RB3 valuation, I think we can get a decent year out of Gus Edwards as long as he's able to stay healthy. So when it comes to Gus Edwards, I think he'll be a value in drafts because he doesn't have, the name power of some other backs that are going to be going around him. But just remember, his upside is limited because he doesn't catch the football, okay? If we still get, the 10 to 12 touchdown range, get close to 1,000 yards, I think he'll be a steal down there where he's at. The team also brought in J.K. Dobbins. Now, he's coming off of a second major injury, suffered it early in the season last year, and he needs to be healthy before we start to determine where his value is. Obviously signed with the Chargers due to knowing Greg Roman's offense, probably knowing Gus Edwards a little bit, and that they complement each other very well. He's been a violent runner in the past, and we know he's dealt with, ACL injuries. We just got to see him on the field. And so he's recovering at a faster speed than most people even have said. So according to J.K. Dobbins, he feels fresh, ready to go, plans on being there for week 1. We've heard a lot of players say that in the past, but he said he's dealing with this injury, kind of going at a full speed. So we'll see where he is, but J.K. Dobbins, an interesting name to watch. This is a prospect coming in that had some strong, seasons early on. We got to see what he looks like health-wise coming into this season. And then the team drafted Kamani Vidal, interesting prospect, right? A lot of people are excited about him. He was a 6th-round player, so don't get overly excited about him taking on a big workload. Just a speculative watch. A lot of the times when we see later round running backs, 6th-round picks, they don't end up panning out to be much. But over the years, we've seen it where sometimes they get an opportunity and they run with it. And I think there'll be an opportunity for Vidal to get into the offense. And apologies if I messed up the name. But there'll be an opportunity for him to see some workload. It's just, what does it look like with Gus? What does it look like J.K. Dobbins coming back? An interesting prospect because they also still have Isaiah Spiller there for the Chargers offense. So Isaiah Spiller, probably he looks to be like a cut candidate, but one of those two should be able to stick on the roster if J.K. Dobbins is healthy. And if not, I expect both of them to be on the roster and probably competing for touches behind Gus Edwards. All right, where it gets interesting for this team is the wide receiver position. And we got to start with Joshua Palmer, who we know when Keenan went down, Mike Williams went down. This guy was putting up some pretty decent performances. He had 581 yards, 2 touchdowns last season, which really doesn't show how much of an impact he had while he was healthy. There was times where he was, he missed games, but when Joshua Palmer was in there, he was playing a nice role, especially when the starters were out, and he was able to show that. Now, this receiving core is going to be up and down, and I'm sure there's going to be an emphasis on growing the younger players, a 1st-round pick last year and a 1st-round pick this year. So we got to see how it all shakes out when it comes to this, 2nd-round pick this year. But we have to see how it all shakes out when it comes to this receiving core because they're going to have opportunity, and I don't think there's any one that we can fully trust, but I guarantee there's going to be one that's around the 800 to 1,000-yard marker. Has to be, with the way Herbert throws the football and if he can stay healthy. So I think Joshua Palmer will be a safe receiver in real football. When it comes to fantasy, I'm not terribly interested. I don't think he's the best receiver out of this group when it's all said and done. I think he's the most veteran out of them all, obviously, but I think one of the young guys will click. My guess is that Quentin Johnston plays a very nice role for this team. He disappointed last year, only 431 yards, 2 touchdowns. As a 1st-round draft pick, when we saw guys like Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Puka Nacua going crazy last year, we didn't get really much out of Quentin Johnston, but some bad drops and some bad performances when the fantasy community expected way more out of him. He's a young player, though. And I think sometimes we forget, young players have to go through things in order to become the player that they are. Not everybody comes out the gate strong. So I'm not willing to give up on Quentin Johnston this year, and I actually think there might be some value with Quentin Johnston this season. So when we're looking at drafts, I don't think he's going to be drafted in a redraft. In Dynasty, this is a player that I would be looking to acquire. I'd be looking to go get a player like this because Jim Harbaugh, once he finds his receiver, his number one receiver, they end up being the guy for that team. Now, they're normally not 1,500-yard receivers, but they're a reliable source. So over this offseason, Quentin Johnson said he needs to be better. He knows he needs to be better and got backed by Jim Harbaugh during this offseason. So while I don't expect Quentin Johnson to become, this wide receiver one candidate in fantasy football, I do think he can provide some wide receiver three flex appeal during bye weeks at some point in the season and maybe more. We got to see consistency. We got to see improvement over this training camp, this offseason, this preseason. We need to see him improve, but I think he'll have opportunity. And don't forget, he has a big frame. This guy has a big frame, can win in the red zone. There's potential here for Quentin Johnson, especially because his team doesn't have a big body really at tight end outside of Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. So Quentin Johnson, don't penalize him too much. He was a rookie last year. Don't let him slip too far. And best ball, I'd be all over a player like Quentin Johnson in case he hits. And then last, we got to talk about pick this year, Ladd McConkey. Obviously in a Greg Roman offense, there's not a lot of volume to go around. And I would say that would be the one thing that I'm worried about with Ladd McConkey, who's probably going to fit in somewhere in the slot, in my opinion. He's 6 foot, 185, so doesn't really have a lot of size. But in Greg Roman's offense, we know it's going to be run-centric, and there's going to be, some plays for the receivers, but not a lot of available targets. Like, they're just not going to throw the ball as much. And he already had limited production in college. It's not like he had great production. I know he has that Cooper Kupp type feel. That's a lot of what people are saying about McConkey, but I'm not overly excited for year one. I think we need to temper our expectations for year one and just know that these other guys are going to get opportunities too. It's not like he's the only receiver on the team. Joshua Palmer is going to get an opportunity. Quentin Johnson's going to get an opportunity. I think at best, McConkey's going to be third in line for targets. And there's actually another name that I think might take some snaps away from him as soon as this season. So Ladd McConkey's a name to remember, but I wouldn't be pressing to just say you have to get this guy in Dynasty. I think that it's going to take a while for him to stick, and he won't. The fantasy numbers, we got to think about the fantasy aspect of this. He might be a real piece for this team, but I think short-term, fantasy-wise, we're not going to see a lot out of McConkey in the red zone. Receptions-wise, it's going to take a while. He's not going to just replicate what Keenan Allen did because it's a brand new system, right? Careful with McConkey. And then lastly, I got to talk about DJ Chark coming to this team. DJ Chark's a player who played well at times for Detroit, didn't play well in Carolina, has had an inability to stay healthy, which is the best availability. You got to be able to be healthy, right? Available. And DJ Chark hasn't been that. So while I see him coming in here, and he's probably the biggest name out of this group, and with Jacksonville, he played well, like we just haven't seen DJ Chark play good football in years. So I'm out on DJ Chark, but the name is interesting, right? If he could stick, like I said, he's the best name value. I just think he's going to be more of a depth piece as opposed to being a starting candidate, which I think the other three of the starters, Johnston, Palmer, McConkey, but if any one of them slips at any time, DJ Chark could step in and help. So the Chargers will be a very intriguing team. A lot of question marks when it comes to this Charger team. We'll probably see a shakeout here over summer, but should be interesting team to watch this year. They're going to be at the bottom of the barrel, but for fantasy, we might be able to find a couple gems on this team that help us later down the line. All right, so I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.